Let's welcome back from lunch. This is a dangerous moment where you start to enter the post-food coma, and so we're going to have to make sure things are extra juicy and energetic for you. I wanted to mention a couple of things that we had hanging from the morning, and then change gears into another direction. A couple of things I want to pull up. Now, all those maps and visualizations I was showing, those are all up here on the wiki, so you can just click to them. A couple of resources I want to point out, one in particular. I haven't talked about copyright, and copyright is a nightmare. It's a mess. The less said about it, the better. It's a real broken system that just kind of shambles along now. We don't know how to repair it. So one way of getting away from that is to work with materials that are not copyrighted. Now, one way is, librarians, help me out. What's the current year? Is it 1923? That's the break point? 25, 24? So materials from before then. And you guys all know this implicitly, because if you look at Dover paperbacks that only cost $1, they're all from that period. That's why they're so cheap. And that's why you see so much Jane Austen everywhere, because she's all in public domain now, right? But another way, so that's always good. In fact, how many of you listen to books on tape or audiobooks? Oh yeah, well you should know about these guys. This is a wonderful project that economists have studied because they didn't think this could possibly work. LibriVox is all audiobooks recorded by people from around the world. They're all free. They're all public domain books, and most of the readers are not from the United States. And I'd say about half of this is English language.
The interesting thing about LibriVox is how uneven it can be. You can get some incredible readers, and then the next chapter will be somebody that just is.
So you have to listen and check. I mean, there's a Bulgarian who loves Victorian literature, so I just love hearing Sherlock Holmes with a Bulgarian accent. It just makes me. So we'll go through this, and let's see. So we've got a ton of, for example, we're talking about Sherlock Holmes. We've got a ton of this, and you can download these in all kinds of ways. And a lot of these too, this is really neat. They're linked to materials that are in the public domain, so you can find the Project Gutenberg versions and so on. This is all free, and the volunteers all read this. It's really neat. Anyway, it's a free thing for you to look at. The other thing you can do is look at materials that are licensed to be uncopyrighted. So we're talking about Flickr. When you upload an image to Flickr, you can set the copyright setting for the image you put up. So the default is copyright, because that's the way copyright law works. If you make something and you put it into a tangible format, like you record an MP3 play, you own the copyright to it. That's the basic principle of copyright as we know it now. But you can get rid of copyright. You can change your mind. So something like 1% of the images on Flickr are published under alternative licenses. 1% of several billion. So let's take a look. I'm going to search for these. Now, these are photos which, if you use them, you can do anything you want as long as you tell people where they came from. And there are 42 million of these photos, which isn't a little bit, right? That's a few. So I'm going to search for Atlanta. That's what we get. So if I'm making a poster, if I'm making a movie, if I'm doing a PowerPoint presentation, you might find something here for you. I strongly recommend going there. You don't need to make a Flickr account. You can just grab the image. Let's see how big this one is. That's kind of big. That's pretty big. And you can use that. Now, you might not find exactly what you're looking for, but I think it's worth a shot. You know, this is the group that has, let's see, 42 million. This one's much smaller, only 14 million, sorry. 76 million here, 35 million here. So you might just find something good. Now, the other thing I want to briefly mention is a totally wild topic that we haven't really discussed. And I want to see what I get if I do this. Hang on a second. I'm talking about visualization. Has anybody here played with 3D printing at all? Yeah. Well, let me see if I can find a good example right now. 3D printing is a technology that is now becoming available for us to use for a low cost. 3D printing does exactly what it says. A machine prints a digital file in the physical world. The stuff it uses is plastic or resin or paraffin, and the object that appears, I'm trying to find a good example of it, is solid and you can use. Now, the initial uses of these were for models. So you had architects and engineers. So you've got an architect in Atlanta working for a client in LA. The LA client says, I want to see what this bridge looks like. Well, the architect says, open your printer and I'll print you a copy of the bridge. It prints the bridge out and you can play with it. There's a human ear model being printed, used for healthcare. People are already printing plastics to be used in bones and in surgery. You can print out toys, you can print out models, you can print out little bits of furniture. A couple of guys printed a small shack to use outside, which actually resisted the elements. Most famously, you probably heard someone was able to print most pieces of a gun that you could actually print. Libraries have started using 3D printers so that you can print there on demand. Like, remember when Xerox machines came to libraries? And you put in quarters and print stuff out, right? It's the same idea. Now, for visualization purposes, these are extraordinary because you can print out stuff that normally you might not have access to. So imagine teaching history and being able to print out a ship or a tower or a piazza, something that you wouldn't normally have access to. For science, where's our biologist? I just gesticulated at you. I didn't mean to accuse you of biology. But we've seen people who are working with microbiology printing out cells, DNA coils, things that they have to remember, build models out of plastic and sticks with. So you can have a lot of fun with these. Now, costs have dropped. We're talking now about a printer costing $1,000. All right, I'm not going to buy one today. I've been tempted. But your library can afford it, right? Or a public library can afford it. Staples in Europe right now lets you print on demand. You email them a 3D file, they'll print it for you and you pick it up. And it costs like a couple of bucks. Something to watch for. Depends on your field. The phrase that I keep conjuring with is 3D printing across the curriculum. But for right now, it's the sciences and the arts. So, I mean, I think sculpture, for example, an obvious case. Now, I mentioned copyright. We're just beginning to worry about that. Because we now have image capture that's so good that you can walk into somebody's house, photograph a vase or say, a camera, take it back, stitch it together, and print the object. So museums are torn because they don't want to lose that, but they think it's good for the gift shop to be able to print something, So imagine being able to print a vase or print a sculpture. Right? Now this is brand new, and it's just beginning to take off. Something to think about. Okay, for visualization purposes. About filtering, I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of resources that are pretty useful. Here's one. If you don't know this guy, Howard Rheingold, I strongly recommend paying attention to him. Howard's a wild character. When you may know the term virtual community, he's the one who came up with the term and defined it. He's also, you've heard of flash mobs? Yeah, this is his term that he came up with. And he came up with this in a book called Smart Mobs, which is a pretty influential book about mobile computing and society. And so he has a recent book on digital literacy called NetSmart, which is very good. I recommend it. But one of the things that he has is this is an early adopter, bleeding edge technology guy, who is also an unreconstructed hippie from the 60s. I mean, he dresses wild, loves to do great, crazy things, he's an amazing gardener, and he stops using technology at times. In fact, he's been experimenting with students at Stanford and Berkeley about getting them to use technologies and then not getting them to use technologies. So it's really interesting to see. For example, do you know the term email apnea? Well, apnea is a sleeping problem with breathing, where you stop breathing or you don't get enough breath. It's actually a disorder. Well, an interesting scholar was looking at people answering email messages and found that when they're at their desk, they would lean forward and their breathing would get shallower because they were constantly on the edge of email. I don't know if you guys have a little warning sign that says when emails come in, like a little bell or a light. They were living for that. It was like they were running through, through trees, being chased by something, and they were becoming their breathing was getting shallower, which is unhealthy for you. So he's actually talking about ways of getting away from that. Turn off the alert system, but also to take time to not have technology. If you read his book or check out his videos, he'll be talking about having students practice meditation in class, which sounds crazy until you realize it totally works. To have students close their laptop, close their eyes, turn off the lights, and think of nothing for 3 minutes is a shock to an 18-year-old. But they love it, and they learn a lot. So this is someone, if you're interested in too much information and handling it, this is someone to pay attention to. He came up with a goofy term that I think might actually work, which he called the infotension, where she was talking about, attention and information. And he has this list, this is linked from the wiki page, of resources about how people pay attention to information. And it's the best resource on the web. I mean, it's just tremendous, beautifully curated. So this is something to look for if you're interested. Now, let's go back to Twitter for a sec. Let me see who else has been talking about us. Oh, by the way, I'm showing you the live web. This is one of the attractions of using PowerPoint. PowerPoint is dead, right? It's not connected to the internet by default. It's just slides, right? Nothing can go wrong with it. But I'm showing you the live web. All kinds of problems can happen, right? Remember that web page that didn't load very well? I was showing some people Google News once, and I turned around and they all gasped. I said, yeah, isn't it a cool tool? And that wasn't why they were gasping. An explosion had just happened 10 miles down the road, and they were worried about their homes. I'm like, sorry. I showed another group a wonderful blog resource that in the previous 6 hours had been hacked by porn spammers. I didn't know that. I pulled up and said, whoa, that's interesting. So showing you the live web, don't blame me. Blame the human race, right? So let's see what's come up. We've had, let's see, thank you, Manya. Yeah, I agree, Renee, great dialogue. So we've got our back channel, which is very polite. And let's see if we have any questions that could come up in it. Not right now. Okay. And here's the Woodruff Library saying hello. Okay, good. Now, what we want to talk about for the next hour is talk about the idea of the flipped classroom. And that's one little point. I hate talking this much. One little point. All these Twitter feeds, right? How many of you are gardeners? Good. Good. And you garden in Georgia, and I can't help but say how much I envy you. Like I said, we're having our first frost any day now, so. Too much rain. That's an interesting problem. You guys are always wet, though, aren't you? I mean, huh? Did you have that drought last year? I didn't know it was here. I was saying in the Midwest, it was a killing drought. It was terrible. Huh?
We've been in drought for 7 years.
Just Atlanta?
Well, no, all of Georgia.
Huh? I didn't know that. And now suddenly you get too much rain.
Yes.
It never works this way, right? It's always a pain.
Bizarre.
So you gardeners know that you have to kill things sometimes. You have to uproot. You have to prune. It's an essential part of gardening. The same is true for social media curation. So you have to, when you are following people, if they stop being interesting, you have to delete them. That's actually hard for people to do, I found, because this is kind of personal. Social media is good enough at making personal connections work that you feel it's kind of rude to delete people. But you have to be ruthless. So if you have feeds that aren't working for you, or if, for whatever reason, you changed your mind, they stopped being good, you have to prune them. This is part of the filtering behavior. You have to be able to prune and stop. Okay, so let's talk about the flipped classroom. This is the third big phase of the day. People have been talking about the flipped classroom for the past few years. So let me just make sure I understand where you guys are. What does this term mean to you? What have you been talking about, flipped classroom this, flipped classroom that? What does this mean for you guys? This isn't a quiz. I mean, I'm honestly, it's a new term. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Go.
I just put content outside of class,
Okay.
activity or use inside class.
So let me put this in here, in our notes. 'Cause that's a nice phrase. Content outside of class. Activities inside. Am I off? Where's the beard? Move up a bit. All right, let's try this. Okay, good. So, does this make sense to you guys? The content outside of class? So what is content in this case? Lecture notes? Textbooks? Yeah. So in your class, what would instructions be?
I could probably post a video of the lecture itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Give some illustration and do some research on what I would normally say to them.
Nice.
I don't have to say it in class and they fall asleep.
Can you guys hear her okay? Well, she's talking about having videos of things that she would normally say in class, but accessible to them outside of class, which is including instructions for work, right? Because you have a photography class? I'm trying to think.
Photography, art appreciation, things like that.
So to have them do things outside of class that you would normally be telling them. So go forth and take photos with this kind of light, for example, right? Or
They already do that.
so what would an instruction be in your photography class then?
Instead of having a lecture inside of class, they do that in time
Okay.
and time and see it on their own time.
Good.
They can multitask with that, right?
Outside of class, yeah. So that's an interesting way of pushing the multitasking out, giving it to their time. Do you guys, in your different campuses, do you have a rule of thumb ratio for hours in class to hours of work students should be doing? I mean, like 1 to 2 or 1 to 3? What? And I said what it was supposed to be. I mean, that's a deliberate choice of words. Does that sound right? 1 to 3? Okay. So you have to think, in that 3, they have tons of time to be listening to you lecture or reading your lecture notes. And then in that 1, wow, now what do you do differently? What do you do during that 1 hour? What do you do during the class period? What's different? You said activities in class. What are some of these new activities or expanded activities?
For journalism, we're actually writing in class.
Oh, great. What kind of journalism?
News writing, basic news writing.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. So normally you would assign them to do that in class. I mean, you assign them to do that as homework. But instead now you're saying take 15 minutes or something and
Usually 40 minutes, I mean, it's
Wow.
about part of the class. Yeah, it's about writing the story, structuring the story.
uh-huh.
Sharing so that people who aren't getting it,
Mm-hmm.
looking at each other.
So they workshop each other's work, peer review, and then you get to circle around
Right,
and help everybody out.
right.
Okay.
And we read what is really good. If somebody's written a really good lead, we read it. And we give us their own lead.
How do you do that? Do you put up an overhead or something? And where are you again? You're at
Journalism.
CAU. Okay. Let me just add a little bit of that. So activities such as writing. What else would you do? Or are you doing if you're already flipping classes? Yeah, please, please.
One of my professors at ITC filmed this was for introduction to the degree.
Mm-hmm.
Filmed their lectures and we put them on the LibGuide. And then during class, they actually do translation.
Translation, what, Greek to English or Hebrew to?
Biblical Greek.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So lectures, this is classic, writing, translation, good example. We'll come back to that filming in a minute, because that's important. Those of you who haven't done this, or who are thinking about it for the first time, what do you imagine you'd like to do based on your discipline? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, like in history and some of our world survey classes, we have way too much content to cover in one semester that it limits the amount of in-class discussion
Right.
that we can have. And so by doing the lecture outside of class, you can actually engage with students a little bit more and not
Yeah.
worry about losing weeks, being weeks behind on where you're supposed to be in your syllabus.
Yeah. That's, survey classes, coverage classes, that's an especially huge problem. Yeah, what's one of your classes supposed to cover? Give us an example.
Well, the class I'm teaching this semester basically covers evolution up to the 1500s.
I used to teach I had 1,000 years of British Lit class. It was called, we call it Virginia, Beowulf to Virginia Woolf, right? You'd be like, well, no problem. Yeah, I'll just cut right through this. So instead, shift some of the lectures you would be presenting. So in the year 1200, this happened. Put this in lectures, audio or video?
Both.
Uh-huh. The rest of you guys, let me hear more from you. Yeah, please.
There's something I've been wanting to do with this cohort, if possible, which is for a class that is doing an assignment that can relate to one of the archival collections here that for the flipped classroom, the professor would either post a lecture online or an explanation of the assignment, or they'd have archive instruction online for them. And then for the actual class time, they can come to the archive, do the research with the collection, and have the archivist there, as a resource while they're getting started on this, so they'd already come in prepared with some sort of explanation of the assignment and what collections they need to use. It's something I've been pushing to all our liaisons, but nobody did yet, but I still think we're going to do it.
Well, I would think that the being physically in the archive to do work that isn't you lecturing at them would be so important, because the physical space of the archive is so important, and there's so much process that they have to do. Well, writing, I mean, it's a kind of ordering translation. It's the kind of really active work where you being there to guide them, to coach them along is so critical. And then you could easily record a few lectures. Welcome to the archives. Why do I require you to handle these with gloves, or not bring a soda can in here, and all this. And you can record that so they can just watch that ahead of time. That's a great example.
Well, we should talk because my project uses the Maynard Jackson collection.
Right?
And she's got a great idea for this, by the way. You should definitely talk. Well, this is, okay, good. I want to make sure that I'm on the same page, because this is a major, major development. And it also isn't. The major development is because of the technology. We now have newer or more developed technologies that let you do this. The thing that hasn't changed is, in some ways, we're talking about Socratic classrooms. I mean, less lecture about the Middle Ages and more discussion about the Middle Ages. Well, this is what the Socratic idea is supposed to be about. And then having students come with more discussion, we're kind of used to this. I mean, the English professor is here. English is based on discussion. Philosophy, that's essential. How many of your students go on to become lawyers, I wonder? Yeah, another classic case where the discussion is so essential to the pedagogy. Yeah, please, you don't have to raise your hand. You can just.
I would put this as a whole idea of new technology, because although this flipped classroom is presented as a new thing, it sounds to me, or it's always sounded to me like the same thing as read the book at home, come back, we'll talk about it in class.
You'd think, right?
Yeah.
Well, in part, some of the advocacy for the flipped classroom, like the advocacy for MOOCs, comes from a model of higher education as being primarily giant lecture classes. And that's not crazy, because we still have a ton of classes like that. And speaking broadly, I mean, we have 4,500 institutions of higher ed in the United States, roughly. And believe me, there's a bunch of these that have big cattle call, lecture classes. And so that's part of where the flipped classroom idea comes from. But it's also just the basic assignment that even in a seminar, at times the prof has to explain, what this means and explain that. I mean, I wish our biologist was here doing it, because she has to explain a lot about what you're looking at when you look at the liver and how this functions. So it should be read this, but at the same time, you know, if you have students read Aquinas, say, and come back, they're going to have questions, and your answers may take the form of lectures. And the end of class, before you have them read Aquinas, you've still got to give them warnings on how to read this. You know, what their expectations are, what scholasticism is, blah, blah, blah. So it is an old idea, but now we get to do more of it, hopefully. What are you guys worried about for flipped classrooms? Oh, gosh, it occurs to me, I need to say something. I didn't say this in the beginning. This is terrible, 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 terrible. American culture about technology is bizarre in all kinds of ways. One bizarre way is we don't have a middle way. We see technology as either brand new, the salvation of the universe will fix everything, or we think it's the apocalypse and will kill us all. And it's really hard to get in between and say, well, what does this stuff actually do? You know, that's what's interesting. And I find myself personally that I get excited. I mean, I don't drink caffeine anymore. I used to drink a lot, but I think I still have some energy a bit. And I don't want you to assume that means I think this is all glorious stuff that will solve everything. So when I'm asking about your worries or concerns, I don't mean to say that in a way which is defensive. I mean, I really want to know what some of the issues are, because none of this stuff works for everybody all the time. Some of this might never work for you, or be a good use of your resources. So when I say worries, what are they? Yeah, please.
Yeah, my concern is that, first of all, I don't want to be videotaped. I don't want my voice on anything. And it seems like these lectures, they stifle the possibility for organic discussion. I don't always know what I'm going to talk about in class. It depends on what someone might say in class, you know? So,
Yes.
it seems very rigid, lack fluidity.
Yes.
Serendipity.
You know, serendipity is a made-up word, right? We invented this in the 1700s. It's not a word that we. So if I ever have problems typing it, I feel it's good because we just made it up. It's like copacetic. It's a word that has no essential basics to it. You know, yeah, you know, there's no etymology to it. There's no source of it, right? It's like a recording, lack of improv and serendipity. These are huge issues. And I'll repeat this. So the first is a dislike of being recorded. This is a larger deal than it might sound. If you don't believe that this is a big deal, think about hearing your own voice. Not watching yourself on video, but your own voice. People are very nervous about voice. I teach a class in digital storytelling, which I love doing. And the hardest thing about it every time is getting people to record a voiceover. They would rather learn video editing from scratch than record their voices. And people panic when they record. They'll do it twice, 3 times, because we don't like it. You might remember the first time you heard your voice on an answering machine. Like, that wasn't me. I mean, it's a terrible experience. In video, all right, how's this? How would you feel about being videoed while teaching? It's actually, by the way, pedagogically, it's a really powerful thing. It can change the way you teach, but yeah, it's intrusive. So when you're talking about being afraid of being recorded, that's a live thing. That's a real thing. And we're talking about privacy. That's actually a little part of that, because our lectures are in the special closed room domain of the classroom. And it's a little different to be lecturing out of that. The second part here, the lack of improv, the lack of improv. I'm sorry, I just can't type. The lack of improv, yeah, that's another issue, because you make the lecture, you're done. You know, you're nailed down. There's a guy named Lance Brown who does these lectures on medieval history, and they're beautiful. And you could tell he's precisely came up with them in great detail, but they're done. There's no off-the-cuff remark. They're beautiful and they're gone, right? So that's different. I imagine in the classroom, you wing it from time to time. Yeah, you have to raise your hand. Just
But these lectures, I mean, they're simply a launching point.
Ah.
For all of the serendipity and the improvisation that's going to happen, that was my interpretation or understanding of how this book classroom would work. Not that you were locked in by a lecture or something that you set up. That simply formulates the learning outcomes perhaps
Mhm,
from that session.
mhm.
And then during the class, it allows you to kind of encourage improvisation and serendipity. That, I don't know.
Does that work for you, or what do you think?
Well, I don't see how that would be different from saying at the end of class, next time I want you to think about this, this, and this. That doesn't seem, I mean, we already do that. So
Mhm.
I don't see why you would be bothered with the video. You know, when I use the technology when you will say, show us from here. Have you read this page or this page?
Right now, it's pretty much just from the lecture.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, if you don't really lecture, and I rarely lecture, so, I mean, so I could give some instructions, but I'm not, you know.
So maybe this doesn't work for you. If most of your classes are kind of are free flow, or discussion, then this doesn't. This is like the flipped classroom is like saying, do what you're doing. So there's, in that case, it might not apply to you. Yeah, please.
But I think maybe one of the assumptions is that these are strategies that are going to somehow get students to engage the material
Yes.
in a more useful and a profound way.
Mhm.
I'm just not sure that that happens. I think students, and I've done that, I've recorded up to those video, and students treat it as if they've read a chapter.
Hmm.
And they come back
Hmm.
and they will repeat some things that they got out of the lecture. They will have missed other things.
Mhm.
And then they could have grossly misinterpreted yet another segment. So I'm just not sure that either, you know, strategy engages students or gets to the problem of students just sort of doing out of the classroom work in a very perfunctory way.
Mhm.
You know, and that they really just don't engage the material.
Then the. No, I hear you. I hear you. And I don't say this as a booster or as a critic of blended or flipped classrooms, but the argument is that freeing up more time in the classroom for more discussion or interaction then should lead to more engaged learning. So if a student listens to you talk for 15 minutes about Defoe, then in class, then that's 15 fewer minutes they could have to ask you questions about it and barrage you. But if they listen to 15 minutes of you lecturing at home or on the road or wherever, then that's 15 minutes more in the classroom where they can ask you questions. And they can ask you bad questions, or they could reveal their ignorance from misreading or not having done the reading or whatever. But then that gives you more opportunity to nudge them and correct them and inspire them. And so it doesn't, that 1 to 3 hours is that 1 hour. That's the, yeah, please. Oh, I'm sorry. No, she was enthusiastic. She had her hand right up.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of, I teach mostly freshmen,
Mhm.
and time management is a problem. And I think many of them see the requirement to watch the video outside of class as more time. And
Mhm.
they don't really,
Mhm.
it's like doubling class time.
Right.
And so I'm not sure that they would all devote the time to doing that.
Now, you say time management. Do you mean students managing their class work time outside of class?
Managing all their time. They have
Mhm.
so many other things.
Yes.
They even use the excuse of not having time to even do the reading in the first place.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm going to try it, but I'm hesitant to believe that they will all actually spend the time watching, you know, the lectures online.
Yeah, I hear you.
They don't want to devote too much time to study anyway.
So one thing to think about, and this comes back to your coverage for a big survey class, is to think if you add these lectures of yours, then you have to contract other material. But you're teaching composition?
I'm sorry,
You're teaching composition?
I teach world history.
World history. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
American history. I'm just thinking they'll see it that way, that they, you know,
Uh-huh.
already spend, my class is 50 minutes, which is really hard to, you know, and I teach the same course as Kathy.
Mhm.
The world history survey course, I go from 1500 to the present.
Piece of cake.
So, I'm trying something new this year where I'm trying to focus more on the learning outcomes as opposed to, you know, read this, and let's talk about it, let's do these. So I'm focusing on them trying to think critically about what they're supposed to get out of the readings.
Mhm.
And that seems to be working. So I'm thinking the flipped classroom may work in that context.
Yeah.
That I can go over some of the main points and then they can, in class, we can apply those things to the readings.
Yeah.
I do plan to try it, but I'm just not sure they'll devote the time.
Well, it sounds like an interesting strategy for it. Yeah, please go.
6 semesters, in the fall and spring. I've had the students in the ethics class, instead of doing the traditional type paper, to do the research, but to present a course lecture. So instead of them coming in to hear me lecture,
Yeah.
the class is coming in to hear their team. It's a 2-people team or 3 or 4 people team.
Uh-huh.
And we've recorded it in, what is it, 208. They've been recorded. And so their energy gets into, okay, we are the guest lecturer for the day, and who has the best and greatest PowerPoint presentation. And they really get off into that.
Yeah.
Which surprised me, because I said, all right, there's no energy here. Let's see what happens. But every semester it's gotten better and better and better. And I've just been very uplifted to see them, rise to the occasion. Of course, they're going to get a grade, and so I'm sure that's some incentive too.
Sure.
But the respect for the assignment and their ownership of the assignment is what I've really enjoyed. On the other side of our division, I've taught on the speech communications, in the speech communications department. The last semester I had all of the students to research quotes from 10 great leaders, and that they would have to use those quotes in assignments for the remainder of the semester. So in the library had the Teenie Harris photography exhibit here, phenomenal. Kicking and screaming they came, but when they came back and they had to do their presentations, they had to link a quote from a Colin Powell or Marion Wright Elderman to Teenie Harris's photo and present that in a PowerPoint presentation. And their energy, they enjoyed it. 2, their respect for what he brought to the table in terms of his work, and the fact that it was here and on their campus. They really, really enjoyed that. So sometimes, I guess, I hesitated about flipping the classroom and not doing the traditional lecture and give a pop quiz or a quiz or what have you. But I've learned in watching the students' response that there are some benefits. You just have to kind of take the risk and push them.
That sounds.
To think outside the box.
What was the first class? The one with the student lectures?
The ethics.
Ethics class.
Ethics, yeah, ethics and media. Philosophy and ethics and media.
That's terrific.
Yeah.
Can you guys all hear? Okay. See, since you teach speech, I'm assuming they all heard you clearly. But those are. But we're talking about activities, right? I mean, these are students giving presentations, and
right. And being recorded.
And let me just add that, if I could, to the content outside of class plus student work outside of class. So this is something that's kind of radical to us right now, and people running educational institutions, but it's not radical to students. What course management system do you guys use? You guys are using Canvas now, but WebCT? Moodle? Okay, the default setting for those is basically this room, that all the electronic activity stays in that one class with the instructor, and that's it. In fact, there's copyright reasons for this, actually, but it doesn't leave that. And that's actually strange for students who live in this world of social media where this is all shared. Well, one pedagogical aspect is that it keeps the student work away from the world. Now, sometimes we do this deliberately. I've talked to some professors who say that sometimes because they think the student work isn't good enough, sometimes because they think the topics are too sensitive. I know an American historian in Ohio who insists that his students, what they're talking about is so ethically fraught that it must be kept offline. But then you have other pedagogies which say, no, you learn more from encountering a larger audience. But the technology forbids that choice, and you're locked in. But what you're describing with student work being recorded, well, then it can go outside. You can put in the library webpage or in the archives. And then that changes who they are as they're presenting. Because if they're presenting for you, that's a specific audience. But if they say this could be for anybody in the world, wow, that's pretty wild. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah,
respect to students thinking about self-presentation, right? And so I think that there are issues involved in locking things, because a part of what it seems like a lot of institutions are attempting to do is have students think very critically, historically, about their representation.
Yes.
And given that this generation has grown up in some ways, representing themselves without any boundaries, it seems as if, I mean, like, I lock my the first year experience blog because they just don't seem to be steeped in history enough for those ideas to just be out in the world without having some kind of frame.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. That makes sense. You got to think too, K through 12. You're talking about 18-year-old students, right?
Yes.
I mean, K through 12, we can say all kinds of things about it, but one thing is right now, students don't emerge from that having a critical understanding of technology. That's not the fault of anybody. It's because schools don't have time to teach that, and they usually don't have the resources to teach that. In fact, when they teach technology, it's mostly instrumental. Keyboarding, how to search, and they do some information literacy, but it's at a kind of basic level of how do you find stuff, you know, what else is there besides Wikipedia. So when they come to you, they may know how to throw the switches on Facebook privacy, but they don't have a historical understanding of what that might mean. And so, which is a benefit for us, because then we get to teach them that and bring it out, make them think about this. You know, what does it mean to be in college and still have friended some of your high school pals? You know, that's interesting. That's different. You know, what does it mean to have a picture of you doing whatever in public? I mean, those are discussion topics that just work automatically. So this is a tricky subject. You know, that we may be seeing across America a big revolution of a decline of class lectures and a move towards discussion and activities of all kinds. We might not. It's exciting, and it's pretty complicated to track. I'm really conscious of the unique situation you guys have with your students. Let me mention a couple of technologies that are part of this, just to make sure that you see where this is an old idea with new technologies. Let me just quickly mention these and then offer a couple of spins. Audio recording. Please don't underestimate the power of audio. Some of you may have experienced the terrifying feeling of younger people out-technologizing you. This can be an unfortunate feeling in a lot of ways. It dates back to the 19th century, by the way. People did that a lot then. There's discussions of early telegraph reporters and operators being weird and geekish, and older people being not sure what to do with them. I love this stuff. But you can reverse that generation gap. Podcasting and audio. The average 18-year-old has not listened to a podcast. Time and again, they don't know from audio. They don't listen to audio books. The term doesn't mean much to them. They definitely don't listen to radio for non-musical content. Why would they? There isn't much out there. But you guys have. You guys haven't listened to NPR, for example, which whenever I go to campus is the single most powerful unifying force across higher education. That and parking. But everybody, you know, when I go across, no matter what discipline, no matter what field, NPR, that's an issue, right? But we listen to Baby Prairie Home Companion, right? How many 18-year-olds listen to that voluntarily, right? So you can reverse the generation gap. You can say, well, podcasts, audio. Let me tell you, kids, because this is the live technology that I know about. You know, there's another reason too. If you use iTunes buries podcasts deep down. In part because you can't sell podcasts most of the time, and in part, I don't know why. I mean, it's unfortunate. So they're not really visible. So if you use audio, you really have a leg up. And audio has another advantage from multitasking. You can multitask while doing audio. It's hard to do that with video because you take your eyes off. So like you can listen to something while you're driving. You shouldn't watch something when you're driving. Now, there's a great tool for audio that I really recommend, which is free and a standard in the field, which is called Audacity, which is a great pun. If you're interested in the politics of this, it's an open source tool, which is why it doesn't have fancy schmancy design. A big gray slab, oh my God, Steve Jobs would kill them all. But it works. It's a simple recording tool. Let me see if my mic is working. I think it is because I'm talking too loud. Yep, that sounds about right. Let's give it a try. See if my mic is working. I think it is because I'm talking. See what I mean? It's not that complicated. And then you can save from Audacity to your desktop. I mean, it's really not that complicated. This is free. It looks like this in Mac and PC. You can use it. Now, it's basic. If you look up top, there aren't a lot of menu options. There's enough to get by, but you can use it. I don't know if you guys, the library and IT, support this, if you will give tutorials or whatever, but it's pretty easy to use, and there are lots of YouTube videos on how to use it. So this is for audio, right? Now, if you're a Mac person, and you're a Mac fiend, I can tell, so GarageBand, I strongly recommend. It's a great audio recording tool. It's more powerful. Plus, for you guys, it has this giant library of copyright-free audio tracks, so you can throw in music if you want for free. That's kind of fun. But those are powerful tools. No. Please do.
If you have files, create files on Audacity or on Garage, and if you want to send them, say, to yourself or whatever else, are they, I mean, how large are they? How, because I've had difficulty with
Yeah.
getting things to go through email.
Don't do it with email unless it's very small.
Okay,
Okay, first of all, save it as an MP3 file. You can save it as MP4, but MP3 is more universal and tends to be smaller. And then place it somewhere else. Dropbox is a good place. If you have a Google account, you can upload to your Google Drive, and that works really well. Now, if you have a Gmail account, you can mail yourself some fairly big things. I wouldn't do that. I would just use Dropbox or Drive. No. Definitely. Now, I'm sorry, you're at Spelman. Do you guys have a campus drive for individuals? No. Okay. Some schools do, some don't. I mean, it's kind of random to see who does or who doesn't. Some schools do. If you don't worry about it. But I would recommend using one of those two tools because they're free and they're pretty easy. Now, you might... Hey, one second. Let's go.
And then you email the link to the file, not the file.
Oh, that's
So when you upload something to Dropbox, it gives you a URL, which is dl.dropbox.com/blah. You just copy that to yourself, and copy that, and then you can email it to yourself or email it to your students. The other thing is, depending on what your campus wants, they might want to host some of these files, either in your course management system or just in a server. Ask your campus IT; they'll know about this. So they might want to store it there themselves. That's up to you. That's up to them. That's a great question to ask. That's a great question. Now, audio files, here's the hierarchy. Text, small, easy. This is why when you buy a Kindle, you can download a whole novel in a couple of seconds because it's text. Next biggest is images. Next biggest is audio. Then you get video, and then you can just kind of go up from there, really. Video is a hog. Now, here's something else. If you want to get really fancy, when you're playing with audio, like in Audacity, or when you're playing when you're editing video, you can't see this, but you're actually making a really huge file. It's called pre-rendered. Never send that anywhere. I had a wonderful professor at a school I can't mention who had her students doing digital storytelling, and she had them all doing these great videos, and they all uploaded their pre-rendered video to the campus network at the same time. Shut down email, the web, the whole internet. I think lights went out, just, so don't do that. But when you're editing this stuff, when you're done with it, you squeeze it out as a narrower, smaller file format, like MP3. That's the whole idea. It's called compression. That's what makes this work. You had a question.
Yeah, I have a situation that I'm trying to get resolved, and this kind of helped trigger that.
Sure.
I'm glad for this discussion. Our Philharmonic choir has a selection that I need to get copies of. So he was trying to email me the version of this song that the Philharmonic performed. And so now we've been going back and forth. Well, it's too big. You can't. How do I get it so that I can share it to 22 other faculty members?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so what you're saying is that he needs to copy this into
Dropbox or Google Drive?
Dropbox or Google Drives, and then once I have and send it to me that way in a link, then I can share the link with the other faculty. Is that what you're saying?
See, I don't have to do any work at all. I just have to nod, because you're right. Here, let me show you. This is my email. Don't look at that. But this is Google Drive.
This is Google Drive, okay.
Yeah, they call it Drive because it's basically like a giant hard drive for you that they maintain in the cloud. And so I have all kinds of crazy stuff up in here, and I can just upload something to it. Now, when I do this, let's see, what's a good example? Okay, here's something from my town. This is a image file that we've worked on. I can do things with this. I can share it with people, but I can also edit it, and then I can, hang on one second. I can deliberately share it with people. Do you see up here in the top right? So this was private, and there's a good reason for it. This is not a document that was supposed to be shared with the world for various reasons. So you can basically add people's email addresses. So if you've got, you said like 10 people, 12?
22 people.
So you can just copy them, paste them in right here, blah, at edu or whatever. Now that might be cumbersome, so Dropbox might be a better way of doing it, but that works. Now here's another one. I don't know if you guys have used this. This is a service called Hightail. It used to be called yousendit.com. So if you ever need to send email something to somebody and it's so big you're afraid it'll break the email box, you just try using this. It's pretty easy. You go to the service. Hang on a sec. See if I remember my. Yeah, yeah. I like free stuff. If it costs money, I tell you.
ITIL has a fee. It has you can try it for
You can try
Yeah, and I haven't had a problem with it yet.
free trial.
Yeah, if I remember which one I had, forget. I have it logged in. But basically, you upload a file to them, and then it sends a URL to the person you want it to go to. So for your 22 people, this might work for you. And then you email them ahead of time and say, hey, by the way, you'll get an email from hightail.com, and it'll say this. It's not spam. It's the thing you want to download. Now I've used this to send like book-length PDFs and video files, and it works pretty well. And there's Dropbox. No, this is a great question. Our internet has gotten faster. We have more bandwidth than we ever used to have. But still, we keep making bigger and bigger media. And the pipes don't always work because we're still growing the pipes out. And don't feel exceptional about this. American bandwidth is pretty bad overall. We are slow to grow bandwidth all over the US. And people have studied this for reasons. It's frustrating. It's phone bandwidth as well as wireless. Now, your schools do a great job, and every time they expand bandwidth, the students eat it all up right away. So we keep trying this. Good question. Let's talk about audio files. Let me mention video quickly, because video is pretty wild. And here are 3 tools you should know about. Now, we haven't talked about the bitter religious war between Apple and the world, but they have an intro video editor called iMovie. It's harder than it used to be, but I still think it's a really good first-time video editing. If you've never edited video, it's a big conceptual jump. The best preparation for it is, how many of you can read music? It's a lot like reading music, because what you get is a horizontal row of stuff, and the horizontal row is time, and you have different beats in the time. So what you do is you put different images in a sequence, and you hit play. It's like store effect. It goes forward. But it takes a while to get used to, so you want to use an easier tool. iMovie is pretty good for that if you're on the Mac side. It's Mac only, and it's pretty good. It's actually charming. In fact, they have a button called the Ken Burns effect, which they license the term from him so that you can use it. And that's pretty good. If you're on the PC side, there's 2 tools I recommend. This is the basic one, Movie Maker. I don't know how they do this. It's a free download. It lets you make movies. I mean, they don't celebrate this. They don't talk about it. It's great. It's very basic, but it gets the job done if you're on the Windows side. So please download this and try it if you're on a PC. If you want to ramp up your power a little bit more, Adobe Premiere is the tool you want. They have a smaller, cheaper version called Premiere Elements, and that's what I'd recommend using for right now. But that's on the PC side. Now, if you're doing video, I don't have time to talk about all the awesome ways to do video. Let me tell you why you wouldn't use video. This is why you shouldn't use video. If you have one person talking, stop. Go to audio. It's great to have a photo of them. Really, it is. But even the most bleeding charismatic person, if it's just their head, it's dull. There's no reason. And you'll find if you watch people watching that, they'll start doing other things. Because they're basically listening to, it's like in the 1930s, people watching radio, you know, they watch the radio box and listen. It's like that. There's no reason to. I mean, if you look at TED Talks, most of the time, there's visuals, right? So talking heads, forget it. Just don't do it. Just go to audio. Everyone will be happier, all right? Now, if you do visuals, you might not need a person at all, because the visuals might be the real thing, the more exciting thing. Do you guys support screencasting? Do you know? If you don't know what I'm talking, a screencast is what it says. You record what's going on your laptop, which sounds dull. Oh, you did? Okay. Well,
We got a demonstration of how.
all right. I saw that. Thwack. I knew. Yeah. But like that, remember that emancipation map I showed you? Okay, imagine doing that for 5 minutes and then talking about it. You know, saying what you're looking at and what you should be paying attention to, and saving that. You wouldn't need to see a person standing in front of it. You might just want the screen and your voice. Don't underestimate the power of your voice, except for you. But you actually have a nice voice if it's recorded that close to you, right? But your voice is, the digital storytelling people actually, they're very cheesy, they're very Californian. They say the gift of voice. And they're right. People's voices are really distinct. So it's really worth doing. Now, if you're doing video, keep in mind that video takes a lot of time to produce, and it's bigger in terms of memory, but video has all these advantages. You have lots of people who love television, right? No matter how bad it is, people watch things, right? I mean, they watch Jersey Shore, God help us all, right? Or you watch CNN, which I think is like taking forks and putting them into your eyes, but they do this, right? People are immersed in video, and that's a language that people can speak. That's one of the reasons we love video conferencing, why we love Skype and so on. So think about doing video for your class, but think about doing it. So for dance, of course you do video. Well, dance and athletics, right? For you, video is a tool of your trade. You know, someone dances and you look back at them afterwards. That's how, or football or basketball, that's how people do these things. That makes sense. But you know, think about literature, think about history, think about biology, where you would actually use video. Now, I'm talking about recording video, making it. Using somebody else's video, well, you're in luck, because the world is full of video content. I mean, YouTube right now is such a cornucopia of material. It's just mind-boggling to see. There are issues with it, with copyright and availability, but my God, you've got so much stuff. And your library has a ton of video as well. So if you're thinking about doing this, if you're thinking about flipping your classroom, whatever that means, you want to think about what you're going to do with the outside content. So these are technologies, and I'm not showing you how to use them. I'm talking about why you would use them. What do you guys have to add to this about audio and video? What's your experience been? What questions do you have? Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm doing video tutorials as part of my project.
For what topics?
It's for drawing, for
Huh.
foundation
For
drawing.
hand drawing?
I'm actually doing the demonstrations, videotaping and doing voiceovers.
Is any of it live? Can I show you? Give me a URL.
It's a blind contour drawing example, I don't know how exciting it is, but it's caudrawing.wordpress.com.
Another WordPress person, see? Yeah. I'm telling you.
Or if you scroll up, you'll see the drawing. Right there's the first set.
And we give this a second to buffer up.
It's with an iPad, and then I do the voiceover and iMovie.
Mm-hmm.
Contour involves drawing the subject as it pours from your sustained vision as you look carefully at scene edges. The pen is just recording the tracking of your eyes on the subject.
So the camera is just propped up to the right of you. Uh-huh.
It's actually, attached to some wooden holder that's locked to a
Uh-huh.
ladder. It's
No.
Pretty hilarious.
You got to do that. I mean, that's,
Well, there wasn't anybody there to hold the camera.
oh, you can tell it's not waving. You know, it's,
So you see the drawing, my left hand, and I'm watching it carefully.
oh, that's, I was wondering why your left hand was in the picture. I see that.
That's the subject.
Yeah, I got it. Now, is your voiceover subsequent to this?
It's after I did the video.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
I explained that in the blog. Yes.
Now, here's an interesting thing that's happened that we don't have with audio is that if you want to host video, you take it to YouTube, right? I mean, there are other hosts.
That's it.
Vimeo is really good, and so is Blip TV, but YouTube is super. It's standard, right? It's very widespread, and it has a huge audience. Now, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, because there isn't an easy equivalent to this for audio. I don't know if you noticed how many audio tracks are on YouTube. Lots of music, for example. What you do is you upload something simple. Here. Okay, let me reveal my music taste right here. Okay, Blue Oyster Cult. And here, all right, here's a classic song. Let me turn it down. Oh, come on. No, but I had ad blocker running. I should have caught that. So we have the music. Right, great song. But there's just this photo of the album cover. So this is really an audio track plus a single image. And you'll find tons of these on YouTube. Yeah.
That's another video.
More cowbell.
I know. Not going to go there. Not going to go there. That's a beautiful joke, though. So you can. So just so you know, that's something to keep watching. It's kind of fun to see. So if you do an audio track, you might want to think about just like adding an image to it and putting it up on YouTube, because it is video technically. You know. How about what's your experience been of making audio or video? What do you guys have to add? Any advice you have if you've been making this stuff? I mean, you have your hand, and so one piece of advice is put the camera in the right spot.
Yeah, don't drop it.
Oh.
It's awesome.
Oh. Anything else you want to share?
Well, just to get it started, I had a small script that I wrote
Yes.
so that I wasn't just ad-libbing the whole thing. But once I got, the first 30 seconds, I was just fine. The whole thing was done in one take.
One take. Well, so this is because this is your stuff. This is what you've said this how many times before?
Thousands.
And the same with doing history class, right? If you're doing, why do we call it the Dark Ages? Let me explain. Or, what happened in the Age of the Enlightenment? Let me tell you. And so you're accustomed to that. But please, a script is great. If you can ad-lib for half an hour perfectly, I hate you very much. Scripts are really, really good. Because especially when you're face-to-face with the technology, it can kind of knock you off center a little bit. And people love script. And with scripts, do whatever you want. I mean, people do crazy things. I've seen people do a Word document, and they just read from it. Okay. But then they'll add stuff to it. They'll add breath marks. They'll add stage directions. Here, make my voice louder. Okay, cool, or whatever they like. I've seen tables where people do columns. Left column is words. Right column is special effects. I mean, whatever works for you. There's no single pattern. Hollywood-style scripts, it's a little overkill, but if it works, cool, Do it electronically, do it in print, whatever gets you talking and moving. Yeah, please.
I've learned to make my audio take as long as it needs to be without pressing stop. To just
Good.
press record, keep going however many times I need to do it.
Yes.
I know that I can chop whatever I need to, but whenever you press stop and press record again, you can have some sort of difference between the takes. You're sitting
Mhm.
closer to the microphone, or
Mhm.
you're leaning back. It creates a little bit of a
you can hear, now that you've heard this from someone who's gone through it, you can hear this when you hear audio recordings. You'll hear a little kind of color shade. You know, someone be talking and then it'll be a little bit like this. And it's the splice right there. I mean, when you're talking about LibriVox, you can hear that sometimes, for example. That's good advice. The rest of you guys, any experience with this stuff? Yeah, please.
I recently made a narrated PowerPoint.
Uh-huh. How'd you do it?
In Camtasia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And at the very least, it was taking a really long time to process it,
Mm-hmm.
render it,
Yes.
and I didn't know why it was taking so long. And the helpful library folks asked me, well, how long is the video? And I said, oh, probably like 10 minutes. Turned out it was a half an hour.
Ah, surprise.
I guess time flew when I was blabbering away. So I was working on making at least a short, trying to make an alternative, shorter version,
Yeah.
or if you can't stand the.
It can be good to have other people look at it and help you edit it, and also maybe chopping it up so that you have highlights so that if there's captions or something.
Yep.
So that
Yep.
people want to take notes, they don't know where it is in that lecture to go back to it. Like, is that it? Is that it? Is that it? I don't know. So we can chop it up and then put them there and label them. I don't know. Like 30 minutes of it, put it onto a web I had to give you a little highlight, sample.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you wanted to watch it, you could watch it.
That's very smart. And if you do that in the MP4 format, those chapters will actually appear. You know when you play a DVD and you skip chapters, it has that effect, which is pretty nice. Thank you for doing that. I mean, it's really frustrating to get an hour-long podcast and realize what I need is the last 10 minutes. I think I'll go away for a sandwich and come back. You know, that's very helpful. Yeah,
I have a question.
please.
Outside of YouTube, do you know any of the other free platforms that'll allow you to upload longer? I think YouTube cuts it off at 15 minutes. It used to, but I think they moved. So now you can go for long, or?
You can apply for an exemption. So the Morehouse and we did for an education.
So the school would have to apply for this.
Yeah.
No.
And you'd have to go up through that exemption.
I think you just have to have your own account. Because I did a half an hour.
And you were able to upload the whole thing to YouTube?
Yeah.
Because I created a screencasting of trying to show my students how to create a WordPress blog, and I went over 15 minutes and it wouldn't upload. I mean, this was last year. I haven't tried to do more than 15 minutes since last year, but last year it wouldn't let me upload it. I had to go back and edit my screencasting down to like 14 minutes and some seconds before I could even upload it to YouTube, because YouTube was telling me it was too long.
Yeah.
They don't get it to be under 15 minutes.
Yeah. Well, they're going to keep increasing it.
So it's a little bit longer now?
Yeah, and try this guy. Try Vimeo. Vimeo is kind of like the leading alternative to YouTube. It's very reliable. It's got good stuff on it, and see what you think. I mean, I'm always skeptical when something becomes huge and hegemonic, and I mean, YouTube is extremely good, but I always keep my options open. You may give two if you have them.
Well, are you familiar with Khan Academy?
Yeah.
I would recommend that strongly as a model for these things, because for two reasons. When you're on the web, you want things small, right? You want small paragraphs, you don't want big, long things. And the same thing is true when you're listening on the web or when you're doing a lesson. That's one of the things that makes Khan's work so excellent, is that it's small. And he did the French Revolution in 5-minute bites and math, of course. It's wonderful, and I strongly recommend looking at that.
Okay, so here, that's a terrific, terrific example. Let me just show you what I was going through here for Khan Academy. So this is I went to economics because I'm that kind of grim, humorless person, and went right here to finance and capital markets. Ironically, that was Khan's job before he did this. He was a hedge trader and he quit to do this. And Bill Gates saved his marriage because gave him lots of money to keep doing it. His wife was like, go back to work. But okay, so here, this is broken down into different topics. So I clicked on inflation, and it says 20 here, which I think means 20 clips. So look at this framework. all these different topics, inflation basics, inflation scenarios, real nominal return. Okay, so let's look at calculating real return last year dollars. And here's the video, which is 2 minutes and 50 seconds. I mean,
Calculate the real return by putting everything in today's dollars.
and this is a screencast again, because you hear his voice, which is kind of distinctive again, gift of voice, but you don't see him and you don't even see his hand. You just see the cursor as it moves around. That's a great example. This is a great example. I'm sorry for showing you economics. I'll back away. The other thing to think about is, I mean, just as a sense of it, exceptions are out there. So this is the great Soviet film studio, Mosfilm, and they put up their entire back catalog on YouTube for free. Okay, just so you know, for film fans and for Russian fans, this is just mind-blowing. This would be like Hollywood, all of it for free right now. That's what this is equal to. It's astonishing. And these movies are 3 hours long. Some of them, they're just terrific. So we're working that way. It's pretty good for a service that we don't pay anything for. Great question. Yes?
I have one piece of advice when making videos.
Please.
Do everything you can to make sure that you have good audio.
Yep.
People are more accepting of bad video with good audio than
Fair.
they are good video with bad audio.
And absolutely. Audio really matters. What would you recommend? Any large-scale tips about making good audio? Okay. But he's absolutely right. Do you guys have a recording studio, an audio recording room in the library? You do? Two? Oh, that is beautiful. You guys should, that is a luxury. Many, many campuses don't have one.
We also recommend the Mass Media Arts Division.
Oh, to use that. That's terrific. Shoot. I'm just going to leave now and start recording something. That's just great. Now, let me ask you a different question just before we close this session out and send you out on a break so you can get some caffeine or whatever you like. What's the biggest class in terms of number of students that you guys teach, roughly? And don't worry, I'm not going to Skype this or put it on Twitter. 25? 45? Okay. Okay. That's a lot. So let me mention one technology that was mentioned earlier today. Do you guys have clickers? Yes. So you know about clickers, right? Yeah. Okay. Clickers they took over really quietly without any buzz at all, which is I'm incredibly impressed by, because it's a weirdly low-tech, high-tech technology that just went mainstream, and no one talks about them. But every campus I go to, people know about them. I don't know if this happened to you. A lot of campuses where they start using clickers, the first place they use clickers is in the classroom, faculty meeting. Once the faculty are used to opining, then they want them in their classrooms right away. The clickers are fascinating. They're remote controls. That's the basic technology. We mentioned, who mentioned Socrative?
She's not here, Dr. Bass.
So she mentioned this as one example. There are a lot of different tools out there. If you're curious about clickers, hang on 1 second. This is the guru you want. There's a guy named Derek Bruff. He's at Vanderbilt, and he's the world's clicker man. He actually has a peer-reviewed scholarly book on clicker pedagogy that is the best place about all the different clicker pedagogies. I mean, so for example, you use two different assessment forms. There's either the quick assessment, have my students learn stuff. Then there's the use that to drive discussion. So in Ohio, I saw a great exercise, political science class. Everyone was in charge of imaginary country. They had 10 money units. They had to spend that on guns or butter. So the prof had a class and said, all right, so what would you do? And they're like, 8 on butter, 2 on guns, 9 on butter, 1 on guns. Yeah, okay, do clicker exercise. Reversed, completely. 1 on butter, 9 on guns. So he said, all right, guys, what just happened here? We didn't want, we're on a campus and we didn't want to sound too military. I mean, it really dredged up stuff right away, which was great for political science purposes. That was, what does this tell us about what we think about domestic spending law? Well, another campus does this with sexuality. I mean, human sexuality class, come on. Ask the students, so, how old were you when you first had sex? Tell us out loud. How many of you have heard? I mean, you can have lots of fun, horrible fun with now. No conversation allowed. Do it with clickers. I mean, for a class like human sexuality, think about that, right? What you can bring out, or psychology. So the first kind of pedagogy is not punitive, but it's a spot check. The second drives discussion, and you can do it with groups. So if you're curious, I mean, stalk Derek. He's on Twitter every second of the day, and he's very nice. He constantly talks to people. Are you rubbing your neck, or are you asking a question? Okay, well, I can't help you with the former, but I can help you with the latter, I hope.
Can we find an application where our cell phones turn into clickers?
Yes. The Socrative one is one that does that. There are tools like Poll Daddy and Poll Everywhere. Some of them are based on text, where you text a number as a text message. And then some actually have an application where it sits on your phone and does that. I mean, that's part of the appeal. For a while, clickers were kind of parallel to phones, but now they're beginning to cross over. Do you guys run an application right now on your campuses that does that? Turning Point. Yeah, that's a major clicker. And you're at? CIU, and you are not. You're at Spelman. She's at CIU, and she should know that. All right. I should know that. That's a great question. Well, clickers took off but if they have phones, they can use them. And then you can put it away, right? You're done now. Take it out, click, click, put it away. But if you add the discussion right afterwards, then they won't need their phones. You know, you ask a good provocative question for that. That was a good question. Somebody in the back had their hand up. That was you. Thanks. Yeah, Poll Everywhere was really one of the breakthroughs that did that. All right. Now, speaking of everywhere, I want to pause now because it's time for break. And we have a different session here, which is when we come back, you talk about digital scholarship as opposed to pedagogy, and then talk about any themes that come up during the day, things that we haven't addressed or that we need to return to. And then also, next steps, things you want to do. So your archive project, for example, or your description of changing your history class, whatever. So come back here in about 10 minutes, stretch, stop using the technology for a few minutes, and then come back.